of someone like Kamala or Joe Biden, who can be a bit frustrating um, to someone who wants radical change very quickly.
hmm I mean, for me, let me just start off by saying that Joe Biden wasn't my first pick
I'm not
either.
asking you to
Um,
necessarily defend him. I'm just curious
but
what your opinion
yeah,
is.
I think when we think about progress, especially now, I think people are becoming so extreme. Progress and progressive are now being used to depict something so negative and radical, and I think that's because of the narrative that this current administration is putting out there, and
Well,
it's kind of.
what do you mean by radical?
You want me to give you like an exact? No, I'm saying the term progressive is being
You mean the
associated.
term? Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
see
it's
what you
being
mean.
associated with radical ideas and stuff like that, which is not.
Hmm.
But I think because it's like we're we're just the drama is so heightened that it just it just becomes crazy. But I have to say that progress, or when you want progress, you have to. I am more of a firm believer of in baby steps than giant sprints and runs, because at the end of the day, the goal is more important. And as long as we reach the goal steadily, and because that kind of a social change that everyone wants in this country, of course, I want this country to be basically the best, most peaceful utopia on the planet. As a proud American Korean, like
Hmm.
people might see me and say, "Oh, she's Korean," but I am American. I was born in LA, Mount Sinai Hospital. If for any of you birthers, this
You could be the
royal blood
president,
was born
President
in the
Jasmine
United
Rice
States of America.
LaBeija.
Yeah, um, that you have to take baby steps. Like there, I think it will just bring complete chaos and craze, because especially because of the current administration. I think maybe down the line, like imagine 4 years ago when Bernie ran for presidency, his ideas were like a fairy tale to some people.
I
It
know.
was
I
fiction.
know.
He was writing the Twilight fucking trilogy series, vampires with glowing diamond skin, Hunger Games realness, like people. But now people like AOC is being elected. His ideas are not that crazy. I think we just need to warm people up. It's like a vocal warm up. You can't just go on stage and sing a full on aria or a giant crazy belting ballad. You have to do warm ups, and I think we're still in the warm up stage, and people are getting
Hmm.
more used to the ideas of the progressive movement. Because, like I said, you have to think about the voters in Middle America who might not have the best education or best knowledge of things and are
Or who
open-minded.
might just have different needs, who might have a different
Right,
viewpoint on
absolutely.
the topic. It's not even necessarily that they're, and I think in most cases it's not the case that they're less intelligent or less educated. It's just that the needs of someone in Illinois or Minnesota is going to be vastly different from the needs of someone in New York City. I
Absolutely.
mean, there's a huge difference. I was just reading earlier. There was a drag queen in New York who, unfortunately, because of health reasons and family reasons, had to move back to the Midwest, and she was saying that she had to totally give up most of her drag, and she had to go back home and get a regular job. And she was like, I was shocked by the amount they wanted to pay me to do this job, but the cost of living is so much different in the Midwest than it is in New York City. It was a whole different idea, and I think we saw that again in the stimulus package that was given by the Republicans back in March or April, where they were saying, well, we're going to give you $1,200, and that might be 2 months' rent to someone in the Midwest or in the
That might
South.
be someone's 4 months rent or 3 months rent,
Yeah.
not like.
Whereas in New York City, that's half of a month's rent. So,
But that's the
it's a
argument that my
very
brother.
delicate balance.
That's the argument that my brother uses all the time, because my brother is more conservative. He's
Hmm.
the traditional Korean Republican person, especially being a doctor and stuff like that. He's like, you know what? If you can't afford to live in a certain city, then you should move to a place where you can afford to live in a certain city with minimum wage. In New York City, yeah, you can't live off of minimum wage. In Oklahoma, you can live off of the minimum wage. And I'm just like, yeah, but wouldn't you rather everyone be available to live off of minimum wage instead of just Oklahoma or just those rural areas, which are beautiful and
Well,
stuff like that. But I'm just
and
like,
also, that is how gentrification happens.
right.
That's literally gentrification. People of a lower income move into a neighborhood where they can survive, or into a place where they can survive, and they create a blossoming environment, and then people see that as a money-making opportunity, and they move in and they blow up the rents, and they blow up the economy, and it becomes it's this kind of vicious cycle of like the poor artists move in and create this wonderful neighborhood, and then the people looking to make quick money come and see that as an opportunity, and they
I think that
kind of blow it up.
I think there needs to be more regulation. But I mean, we're going in a different. And we're here to talk
I
about
know.
Kamala Harris,
and
and
and on that point, Brendan Phillips made a very fair point a little while ago. He said, to be fair, it's still a massive step forward in reference to the Kamala and Joe ticket.
right, right,
To
right.
It's still significantly to the left of both Obama and even Hillary Rodham Clinton's 2016 campaign, and that is certainly true. It is a
Thank you,
more
Brandon. Oh my God, Brandon is so hot, by the way. Oh my God, he's so
and that is
hot. And
very
I think he's
important
a
to this
lawyer. I forgot.
discussion. Brendan, you heard it here first. From Jasmine Rice LaBeija, from the Royal House of LaBeija, and from Pissy Miles, who was once described by the New York Post as a person. Brendan, I think that's a very fair point. That it is obviously a much more progressive campaign, and there are more progressive ideals. My fear is that there are a number of kind of visible talking points that will come from this. A, Kamala is a tough person and she is a smart person. Those are the positives. On the other hand, we do have the fact that she described herself as the top cop when she was the DA in San Francisco.
I mean, but
And
that's kind of the title, isn't it? She is technically
well,
the top
yes,
cop.
but my point is, it's not about. I'm not arguing for or against it. This is not my personal opinion. My worry is that the presentation of this in a moment when we're seeing demands for drastic police reform, I wonder how they're going to address this in their campaign. I wonder how these are going to become talking points, and I worry about how these talking points will affect Donald Trump and his issues. Brendan says we do love a top cop. And I'm pretty sure that Kamala Harris is
Baby, I
exactly
have a
that.
Brandon. I have a uniform. I have a top hat. I have a top hat and everything.
Oh
I have
goodness.
it. I have it for you.
I do worry about how this will affect Donald Trump's talking points, and even Mike Pence's talking points in any debates we may see in the next few
Well,
months.
I think Kamala, because she was so vocal about Black Lives Matter,
Hmm.
just because she held the title and the job position of quote unquote top cop or district attorney or state attorney, um, you can't. I know a couple of cop friends. They're not what they say that not all cops are bad cops, but I always argue, well, where are the good cops now? They should be kneeling
I
with
know.
us and marching with us. But at the end of the day, I don't think you could just like give a broad stroke of a brush of saying, oh, Kamala is one of the cops and she's for Blue Lives Matter. I think because that's why she got picked right now, because plus she's a woman of color and she was so vocal about Black Lives Matter. And I've been watching, even before this was announced, I was watching C-SPAN and stuff like that, how she was questioning, um, what's that guy's name? Chad or someone. What's his name? What's his name? But she was questioning him hardcore. Has any of your agency workers who have used tear gas guns or rubber bullets have been using excessive force? Like she was asking him very, very hard questions. She was being so hard on him, and he is technically the cop as well, right? Like And if she was on the same boat, I don't think she would have questioned him like that and put so much pressure on him and basically read him to filth, top to bottom, and he couldn't even get a single word in because she was going off on him, saying like, "What about chemical weapons on pregnant women who are going
Hmm.
out to protest? Like, are you using tear gas guns on pregnant women and mothers and children? What about that? What are you doing about that? Why are you not investigating those issues?" So I think because of that, because she was so vocal during this whole movement, which I hope continues because the murders of Breonna Taylor and so many are still outside running about, going on vacations.
Even George Floyd has not really seen
No,
the justice that his death deserves.
no, absolutely not. So because of that, I think his team was like, okay, she is good to go. And honestly, like, I don't want to do identity politics, but she's a woman and she's a woman of color. So a lot
Hmm.
of black women and other women of color will come out and vote because of that.
That is my hope. Although some of the criticism that I've seen, and I'm just reporting what I have personally seen, please
Reporting to
feel
you live,
free
yes.
to
Back to you,
to
Chrissy.
correct me in the comments, or to address this in the comments. Some of the commentary that I've seen on my personal feed just this afternoon, because obviously everyone's Facebook blew up today, is that uh, it's not it's not necessarily a sure thing to vote that people of color will jump right in to support Kamala because of some of the things that she did as the DA in San Francisco, especially with regard to her three strikes
Did
platform,
you
which
see that comment? I'm sorry.
I
That is
didn't.
so unacceptable. You know what? I'm just going to ignore it. I'm not going to even. That is a second
Uh,
grade level debate question right there. Like,
Also, at least two cases of the pregnant women getting tear gassed or hit with rubber bullets were not actually active in the protest. They were just bystanders. So, just throwing that out there, according to news sources. Um,
fake news.
but the fact of the matter is that whether or not whether or not people are pregnant, I think the use of military grade
Excessive
weaponry,
force.
excessive
It's a
force against
peaceful
our own
protest.
population is what instigated a lot of the violence that we saw. That's my personal opinion, and I
I mean,
understand
that's
that
not a
that's
personal opinion. That's a fact. The current administration wanted to have a photo op in front of a church, so
I
he
know.
tear gassed people away from the church so he could have a photo op holding the Bible
I
upside
know.
down. Like, what is going on? Anyway, going back to Kamala Harris, I think, I see on social media a lot of people are, hi Todd. Todd from Asbury
Todd.
Park is here.
You know
They're
Todd very
screaming.
well, don't you?
I do know Todd very well. Not,
Hello, Rexy.
but I think, where was I? Oh, I see on a lot of social media a lot of the times like, oh, I'm not voting, or this is not it. Oh, America is doomed once again. I believe America is doomed if you let it be doomed. Don't say that you're not going to go out and vote, because if the Democratic Party is in power and more progressive people join the Senate, join the become a congressman or a senator, like, we will move towards more of progressive thinking. So as long as the Democrats have the power, I mean, would you rather? This was the whole point when Donald Trump got elected, that they were going to throw a wrench in the system, but it wasn't a wrench
Hmm.
in the system. You know what I'm
And
saying? It wasn't a
there's
wrench.
been that's a fair point because we've seen some people. I've seen articles where there was a woman who said she was a teacher who is now faced with being in a position where she has to go back to teach in the Midwest in a school in person in the middle of this pandemic, and she's saying she very much regrets her choice to vote for Trump in 2016, where she now feels like she's being put in a dangerous place, where then she was making a decision that she thought was going to shake things up and give a voice to the voiceless. And I think that's an important distinction that we as liberal people have to also take into account, is that, and I've said this on a number of different platforms, I think, if I'm being honest, progressives and Trump supporters come from the same heart space, but they have a different mindset and a
Yes.
different ideology. We
Yes.
both want to see drastic change to the system. It's just that obviously Trump supporters wanted a much more conservative approach and progressives wanted a much more liberal approach. But the whole idea is that there are a lot of people who feel like they are unheard or unseen in this current political climate. And my hope is that, and obviously there are other people who feel like they shook up the system and continue to support Trump and want that very far right
Yeah,
response to
KKK.
things. And I think it's important now that we have more dialogue like what we're having right now, where we can find the common ground and figure out how we're going to move forward in a productive way. Because the protests are productive. The way we make our voices heard leading up to the election is productive. The way we voice our opinions and our status in the census is important. There are a lot of ways to use your voice that I think a lot of people are unaware of. And that is why having more political voices in the discussion is so important to me. And it's why I worry about Kamala's candidacy. Not that I think she is incapable, but in that I do worry that there's going to be a lot of people who feel a little bit left behind um, with this
I see
choice. And
that.
my hope is that moving forward, we can find a way to lift those voices up and to give them more uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Give them more credence, to give
That's what I
them
meant.
real.
That's what I meant when I said in the beginning of our conversation that we need to stop having like this tunnel vision because we're so hurt, but try to open our ears and actually listen to other people. You know what I mean? Because in the
Mhm.
beginning, I didn't really like Pete Buttigieg, but I listened to some of his comments and stuff like that, and I was like, okay,
When
you
I
might be
was
all right.
covering the Democratic debate in Atlanta, Mr. Buttigieg smiled and ran away from me, and Kamala Harris stopped to talk to me. So that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, Pete
Um,
Buttigieg. I mean, he's still whatever. But
Well, yes, and I want to address something. Dixie and Guzman in the comments said, are looting and rioting counterproductive, or are they productive? And I think Guzman is obviously being
I
facetious. He
mean,
says
you know what?
riots and looting
Because
are
of looting and
productive.
rioting, we have this right now to
Well,
dress
and
up as drag queens to have this conversation on a major platform.
that was
So
going to be my exact point. You're talking to the two most appropriate people for this commentary because
yeah,
the gay rights movement started with the Stonewall riot. I
the
think
civil rights
that
movement,
when
any women's
the
rights.
civil rights, women's rights, all of these movements were started with protests and angry protests. And obviously, in the case of the gay rights movement, that was also a protest against police brutality. They were raiding gay bars, and they were targeting specifically gay, lesbian, and
the
transgender
the
people.
only difference is when those riots happened, it was predominantly can I say beige people in the front. Someone like I mean
Yes,
they
it
except for
is
the civil
important to
rights
note.
movement of Martin Luther King and stuff like that, which we have still a lot of it. But when people of color riot and protest, it's they're starting a war. They're starting a
Mhm.
civil war right now. And when white people do something, it's just like, oh, they're peacefully protesting. I mean, when
Mhm.
was the last time you saw tear gas or rubber bullets shot at white people protesting or any of their protests? I've never seen it. You know what I mean? So,
I mean, I have, and I want to because obviously Dixie and Guzman, I appreciate the fact that you're participating in this discussion, and I'm happy that you're here. Dixie says, "Are you on another planet? Majority of people don't like the daily riots and looting." And Jasmine, you actually, I am a New York City queen, but you live in New York City. I live in the suburbs outside New York City. You participated
I did.
in a number of the Black Lives Matter protests, and can you tell us a little bit about what you saw at
I
those
saw
protests?
so much. I mean, because we would literally block traffic, and all the people that were stuck in traffic would honk, not because to tell us to get out of the way, because they were cheering us on.
Hmm.
So I think, yes, yes, it's an inconvenience when I'm not personally protesting and I go out and the street is blocked off or whatever. It does get
It's
annoying.
frustrating, but
It's
it's meant
frustrating.
to
You know
be
what?
frustrating.
But I think for the bigger picture, me being inconvenienced for that specific moment in time is really nothing. If I can give that up, if I can give that, what, 5 to 10 to 15 minutes up of my life so another person can have their rights and live a
Hmm.
better life, I think it's more of a blessing that I can give if I can't even join the protest.
And
So, yes,
can I ask you another question?
yeah,
Did you see a lot of violence or rioting or stealing or looting?
no, I
What
mean,
did you see while you were there?
yes, looting happens, but looting happens in every single riot or protest. I think you
Did you
clump.
see the protesters
I
looting?
thought I was one of the protesters, and
Were you
the
looting?
no, 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 no. But people try to clump those things together.
Hmm.
Every single Black Lives Matter movement, people who are really there for the cause, will stop any looters from going into a store or destroying any kind of property. I don't
Hmm.
think anyone goes out of their way to break into a Chanel store during, a protest. And it doesn't usually happen during a protest. It happens during the night where there aren't any protests. You know what I'm saying? So that's a point. But I think I was more shocked by the police members there holding assault rifles and war weapons and riot gear, and that was more intimidating, and it literally elevated the tension even more for me when we were all protesting. I was like, oh my gosh, like what is about to happen? So, I mean, the police job is to de-escalate any kind of situation, right?
Hmm.
That wasn't de-escalating any kind of situation. It was constantly putting us on edge, and when you put people on edge, people react in a very what should I say, impulsive,
They become defensive.
defensive and impulsive, and they don't think clearly a lot of the times because you're in that heightened position constantly. So I literally had to keep myself calm because of all this policemen just holding those zip ties, like hundreds of the zip ties, like looking at you, and like batons and guns, like.
And I think the important thing to note in all of this is that the majority of
There's no such thing as
wait,
the
hold on,
okay,
let's not.
okay.
The important thing to note about all this is that I mean you and I have both been very involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, and you have been actively out at the protests. I unfortunately am diabetic, so I'm unable to be out as much right now with the pandemic because I have a compromised immune system. But I have a very, very dear friend, and I won't say his name, but he's a part of the queer trans community in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and he has led so many protests himself. And the thing I've spoken to so many Black Lives Matter leaders and to so many people who are involved in the movement, and the overwhelming response I get when I bring up this topic of, well, what about the looting? What about the rioting? Is that their point is that the protesters' intention is to show up and to peacefully protest. You have people who cling on to any movement and take advantage of it. And so you have people who show up and do those things, and you have people on the side on both sides who instigate violence. But the fact of the matter is that no no person who is advocating for Black Lives Matter is advocating for violence or for looting or for stealing or for or for
Right. I mean,
aggression.
but
It
this is
is
the
it is
same
all about
argument.
a public statement.
Right. It's the same argument. Like, it's not the religion's fault. It's always the human. It's always the people's fault who use that God's name or Allah's name or whatever's name that you want to use to do bad things. There are always people who want to do bad things to and cover up their name and taint another platform that is trying to do good.
And to tie this into the original conversation, obviously we have a very tense situation right now in the country with the Black Lives Matter movement, and I think a lot of people are trying to figure out what the next step is going to be. And I'm my curiosity is what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to do to address not only because obviously Joe Biden has put in the issues section of his website how he intends to address issues of inequality in America with regards
Right.
to race. But since that website has been created, we've seen such a drastic change in the conversation that I wonder what their response is going to be in terms of the conversation that is happening now about Black Lives Matter and about justice for Black
I
citizens who
think
are the victims of police brutality.
again, I think that's why one of the reasons why Kamala was nominated right now and is his running mate because she was so quote unquote the head cop. Like, who else to get more insight than a person who was state district or attorney
Hmm.
general? Wait, is there attorney general? No,
It was no, she was the district attorney.
district attorney. And I think she was a state attorney. No,
She
and
was a lawyer and
state
yeah.
attorney general. Okay. So having that legal background, especially being a person of color and person who didn't grow up with wealth and knew the struggle of every day American lives, I think she will have an insight on how to go about it. And I think again that's one of the reasons why she is his running mate. And I mean, she's such a smart woman. Yes, everyone says that she has such a past, she has such a history and issues, but like I said, every politician has issues. So it's just we're all human. We all have issues. We all have
Hmm.
problems. It's just like, how do you move on and go on from there and go on from learning from your mistakes? I mean, people forget that Elizabeth Warren said that she was Native American, but like we moved past that. You know what I'm saying? Like, we moved past a lot of things. So I think at this point, for the progressives and if you want to call them the extreme left or extreme liberals or whatever, they could use whatever terms that they want to use. I think the message out to them who who feels left out is try to listen, try giving them a chance, try listening to them and what they have to say with an open mindset, because I mean that is the term of like progressive having more of an open mind, right? And listen to what their message is and what they're going to, because I truly believe that they will be a great powerhouse together in the White House. It might not be as progressive or as much of a big step than we would have liked, but it is in the step of the right direction. The
Hmm.
direction and where we're going is the end point is the important part, not right now. You know what I'm saying? The
And
journey
that
is
is,
very, very
yeah,
important.
that is a fair point, and it's something that I do try to remind myself because obviously, I don't want to get too far into my own politics, but uh, I do run in some very progressive circles, and I think a lot of the concerns I'm seeing are A, with regard to uh, healthcare. I think people are concerned about what's going to happen with healthcare. And obviously, it wasn't as pressing an issue when Biden first released his platform, but now we're living in a world that's totally different from what it was 6 months ago or 8 months ago.
Mhm.
And I think healthcare is a huge concern. I think that climate change is also a huge concern for a lot of people. Obviously, we need to see some rapid change. And so that's where I kind of that's where I personally struggle with this this nomination because I'm on one hand I want to say yes, of course it's important that we see incremental change and that it's fair in every way, but then we have a situation where we're seeing people in the immediate kind of losing to the system, and those people are being failed by the system. And I think the question becomes, well, how do we help those people most effectively in a system that isn't changing fast enough for the world it's affecting?
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's just almost, I don't know how to say it, cost of living, like living meaning like that's just how life is, I think, I mean, some
Hmm.
people are born in the wrong century, some people are born in the wrong time. Like, it just takes time to reform even the most basic thing. You can't just erase the whole um, law or whole system and just build it from ground up. It's like you're living in a house, you have a problem or a leakage or termites or whatever. You can't just tear down the house, then where are you going to live? You
Hmm.
have to fix little by little to improve the house and make it better. Like, you just can't abolish the house and build it in one day. It just doesn't work like that. And
Hmm.
I think healthcare is a big issue as well, because especially with COVID-19 and stuff like that. But I think because of COVID-19, it goes even further of like foreign relations or uh, what is happening with climate. Like, where did COVID-19 come from? Is it because of the climate change? Like, there's so many things that it's
Did you
connected
do
to and
you
interwebbed. It's kind of a deep conversation to be had
mhm.
at a later time. Do I what?
Do you have a source for COVID-19 being related to climate change?
No, but I'm saying, I mean, all these wildfires, all these tornadoes, all these
Hmm.
viruses and stuff
I see
like
what
that.
you're saying. I
You know
see
what I'm
what you're
saying? Like,
saying.
I mean,
The
if
world is
we
constantly changing, and
the
that's
world is
the fact of the
constantly
matter.
changing. The virus is constantly changing. I mean, it's crazy. I know Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are not for universal health care. I mean, is that what it is? Yeah, universal health
Hmm.
care or a health
Single
care for
payer,
a
yeah.
single health care for all or Medicare for all or whatever whatnot. But I think some people get confused on what they're saying or what Medicare for all actually means. Just because someone says that it's Medicare for all doesn't mean that suddenly your medical bills are going to be free, and there needs to be a plan. It just can't be just wiped off and everyone gets free medical care. Then you know what? How are we going to pay doctors? How are we going to pay pharmaceuticals to? Not that I'm a pharmaceutical pharma fans. Like, no, absolutely not. But how are we going to develop new drugs to help it? There needs to be some kind of an incentive for people to drive to be. I mean, that's why people want to become doctors. That's why people want to be a scientist or go
Hmm.
into pharmaceuticals, because there's an incentive of making more money. But I think as the government, what you should do is to level the playing field somewhat. Of course, you should profit off of something that you developed from ground up because you have a passion for it. But that doesn't mean that you should charge the public 300 times the amount of what it should actually be. You know what I mean?
Or a
That's
thousand
where,
times the amount in the
a
case of Martin
thousand times
Shkreli.
the amount, especially like something for like Truvada. Like, they used government funding and public resources to develop that drug. But at the end of the day, they're not sharing those drugs like how we shared our resources and how the government shared their resources to help them develop that drug. I think
Hmm.
that's where it becomes an issue. And I don't know if because again, because my parents and my brother and are doctors and in the medical field, like, you have to have some kind of an incentive to be a doctor or any kind of medical field to develop. And that's why U.S. has the highest, or we have the best technology, we have the best medical drug developing records, we have the best tools. Like, everything is constantly developing in America, and everyone is trying to catch up. So I think that is also a very sensitive subject to talk about. It has, again, a lot of issues that is connected to uh,
Hmm.
healthcare for all. I believe healthcare is definitely a human right, absolutely. Um, and I don't think that only the wealthy should receive health care. I think everyone should receive health care, but it's just
Hmm.
about how we go about it. I think that's what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden is talking about. It's like how we go about it. I think at the end of the day, we have the same goal. I don't think anyone who's running for president or vice president is going to say, "Oh, I want certain people to not have health care." I don't think
Hmm.
any decent human being on the planet will ever say that.
No, and
So,
I think that's fair. I think that's a good point. I don't think anyone would ever say that people don't want other people to have health care.
I think
On the
Donald
on the
Trump
flip
would.
side of well, on the flip side of that idea, I do want to point out that I think progressives also kind of have it's a two-way street. Obviously centrists don't really want uh, they don't want people to go without health care, and progressives don't want doctors to not be paid fairly for their work. I
Mhm.
think what it comes down to is how we're managing the budget, because
Yeah,
we're very
absolutely.
free to spend trillions of dollars and add
On
trillions of dollars to the
wars, on
deficit for
stupid shit,
military.
building the fucking wall. I mean, sorry for my language. I'm sorry, but building a
Yeah.
wall, like,
Right.
oh
We're
my
we're making
god.
sacrifices in a lot of cases for military things where progressives are saying, well, let's change the incremental tax rate. Uh let's take reappropriate some of the money from the military that is so inflated and put that back into public programs,
But
things like
that's the same thing with
Medicare for all.
distributing the budget for the cities and the state for the cops and stuff like that.
Hmm.
On the military issues, I do believe that I do support the military. I think we have the freedom because of all the soldiers and people who
Hmm.
sacrifice their lives for us to even have this conversation. So I'm not condemning anyone who is in the army or in the military.
No,
I
and I
thank
don't
you
think
for your
anyone would.
service.
No.
Um, but my mom said, what, military is power. And if you want to be the number one in the world, you have to have some kind of military. And I get that up to a certain point. But you just can't. I mean, Donald Trump spent how much money just rebuilding? Do you know how much he spent, I think, on military this year? Like his term alone? I think it's like crazy amount of money that no president has ever spent before. But for
Hmm.
what? Like, is the military helping us with COVID-19 right now, or are they like, are we going to invade us another country or something? Like, it's kind of crazy. It's like priorities. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
To be fair, I'm not familiar with those figures, so I can't really comment on it. I don't know
yeah.
what he's spent on the military in this last, let's say, quarter.
Hmm.
But I think what it comes down to is I think there's a conversation that can be had about these topics that's extremely civil, the way you and I have spoken today. And my hope to come out of conversations like this, and I hope that we'll have more conversations like this,
I'm never
is
talking to you again. Don't call me. You are
lose
blocked
my
and reported.
number. Lose it. Just delete
Oh,
it.
up to 64 billion over Obama. He spent 60, and Obama, during Obama's term, we were in a war. We were still in a war because of Bush, and Donald Trump spent over $64 billion on
And
the
I think even
military.
more importantly, unpresidential banana says this chick has a deep ass voice.
Not you. I have a cold.
She's a little. It's just the COVID. Don't worry. All right, kids. I think this is. I'm really glad that you joined me tonight, Jazz. You know I
Thank you
love you
so
very
much
much,
for
Miss
having me.
Boosh.
Can I just say this
Um,
before I go and you say the closing statement? Remember, children, go out and vote. No matter who you vote for, even if you vote for Donald Trump or whatever, whatnot, we're not friends. But please go out and vote for whoever you want. And if you're watching this, and if you're one of my fans, or if you're following me on all types of social media at Jasmine Rice NYC, especially on Venmo, JasmineRice NYC. Okay, all right. Please go out and vote blue no matter who. Even Bernie said that whoever the nominee is going to be, he said that he will support as well. So if you're one of the Bernie fans, or if you're one of the Elizabeth Warren fans, or whatever, whatnot, I was personally an Elizabeth Warren fan, please go out and vote. This is one of the most important elections of our lifetime.
and I'm gonna follow that up and say, It is very important that you all go out and vote. That is the only way that you can make your voice heard in this system, is to constantly, whether it's the presidential election, whether it is your local elections, your state elections, whatever it is, please try to participate. That is the most important thing you can do besides coming to all of our shows.
Yeah, and having that's the power that no one can take away from you except for Russia. Like no one can take that power away from you. That's a power. With power comes with great responsibility. Go out and vote.
Exactly. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I
Mwah!
really do appreciate you all stopping in, and I appreciate the commentary we've been able to have, and I appreciate you all being very kind and civil with us, and I hope that we could reciprocate that for you.
Ugh.
Please, I hope you all stay happy and healthy, and
I think Chicago, Portland, and Seattle is beautiful fucking cities and
I'm sure that
whatever.
they are.
Okay, bye.
Good night, kids. Enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you next time.